adopted well over now a decade ago, is in need of update, and the report sets out the intended new policy for corporate complaints and brings back together the corporate and housing complaints into one policy, and therefore complies with the codes of complaint handling practice from both the Housing Ombudsman and the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. The recommendations to you are to submit, hopefully, the proposed policy to Cabinet for formal adoption, and at that stage we'll formally ask Cabinet to approve the member responsible for corporate complaints. And recommendation 2 talks about training for staff, and on that basis, in order to facilitate that, we will set out an intended start date for the policy, which at the moment could be the 1st of September, just to ensure that we get round to all of the departments, ensure that we take them through what the new policy requires of them and the approach to complaint handling, particularly at stage 2. I mentioned the two ombudsmen and their complaint handling codes. The Housing Ombudsman Code is statutory, so there is an obligation on us to abide by that. The Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's Code is not statutory. However, as the report references, if somebody complains to the Ombudsman and there is a finding that we have not followed the expectations of that code, then that itself alone could be a reason for indicating that there's been maladministration by the council. And therefore it's important for us to reflect the two codes and to apply those internally as we take people through potentially a stage 1 complaint, hopefully resolving matters there, but if they are still dissatisfied, then taking them through the stage 2 process and in a consistent and professional manner. The approach to complaints has been developing, and particularly the monitoring of complaints, and this committee has been acting as the recipient, particularly for the Local Government and Social Care annual letter that the council receives, identifying complaints that have been made to the Ombudsman and how they've been processed by the Ombudsman. And we wish to embed that going forward, and that's referenced in the report as well. Key element that we want to emphasise in stage 1 and stage 2 complaints, not just that we want people to deal with it in an open mind, which they should be in any event at the moment, but they should have that approach to resolving the complaint, and that they give the complainant a fair chance to set their case. So all of that is an approach which we would expect from officers as they deal with complaints under the current regime. This is inbuilt into the policy going forward as expectations for staff. We also want to ensure that lessons learned from complaints are an embedded part of the process. As I say, it's an approach that has been developing within the council, so it's not necessarily saying that we don't do that at the moment, but it's trying to make sure that's embedded in the process going forward, and that we monitor complaints across the piece, because there could be lessons learned from housing complaints that should be applicable to all other complaints, and likewise if we're approaching things and we find good practice and lessons that need to be applied to housing complaints, but perhaps have arisen in respect of, let's say, planning complaints, that we make sure that the opportunity exists to take that learning across the council as a single organisation. Chair, as the report says, the proposed policy has been signalled to Cabinet, the intention of developing a single policy. We've also taken it to the Tenants Panel, and the Tenants Panel has said that they appreciate that. They like the fact of bringing it back together, a single policy for all complaints, albeit that there are distinctions as a landlord compared with non-landlord complaints. And also the local government social care ombudsman has looked at it and said that they think it's a good policy. So on that basis, Chair, the recommendations that are set out in the report are proposed to you for you to consider.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, so am I right in understanding this is something that's come out from the Grenfell disaster?
I think the code and a number of changes in these social housing arena have developed out of the Grenfell disaster. And yes, so therefore, and it was the housing code that then sparked the local government social care ombudsman to say that they need to update their code. So it has wide-reaching sort of implications. I would say that, in my mind, that also emphasises the need for a sort of a single council approach to complaints, because as we've just demonstrated, there was learning, central government learning for the housing ombudsman, and then that went across to the local government and social care ombudsman. So it's good to take good practice and learning across, in our case, the whole of the council.
Thank you. And what would you say is the main difference between our last corporate policy and this new policy?
I think for me is the emphasis on lessons learned, on making sure that we do analyse that as we're taking complaints. I think to me that's the more important thing. There are procedural differences. We've changed response rates as response deadlines to accord with the codes. We're taking an approach which says that stage 2 complaints should now in future be a corporate director matter rather than the chief executive. And we are internally placing complaints handling at stage 2 with the governance and performance sort of part of the organisation rather than in leadership support, so that we can, as I say, hopefully embed that lessons learned approach going forward.
Thank you. And hopefully this is something that can be adopted easily with LGR and going forward.
Uh, as we've set out in the report, the codes of complaint handling of both ombudsmen would apply to any new unitary organisation, and therefore a good, sound policy adopted by tendering should put staff in a position of understanding those requirements now ahead of LGR, and therefore place them in the best possible position, ensuring that they know what the requirements are in a wider organisation.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Keith? Thank you, Councillor Stilly.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to say, obviously, so we're showing lessons learned, but I think maybe we should make more of that we were doing a lot of the stuff anyway. Is that what you're saying? So it's not as if if we failed a lot of the stuff which we're now putting out in the new policy is probably stuff which our staff was already doing.
I'm not going to say that the world is entirely perfect. There's always room for improvement. I think the policy will be that springboard for us to take that into departments now and ensure that good practice is applied across the piece. There's always going to be an issue about whether contact from a member of the public is a service request instance, my bin hasn't been emptied, can I have a missed bin? Is that a service request or is that a complaint to say, those people that came down the road in the big van didn't collect my bin this morning? So we will need to ensure that we are approaching that divide between service and identify when is it a service request, when is it a complaint. I think there's efforts that we can make in that. This has been an evolution, I think, and we are, I think, better at handling complaints, and we already have started that monitoring process through this committee in respect of complaints, particularly going to the Ombudsman. And the intention is to take that yet one stage further. So this is an evolution rather than a revolution, Graham. I think that's the point that you're making. A number of these steps we're already doing. It's just trying to make sure that firstly it's embedded in the policy, that it says there. It isn't us as individual officers trying to encourage something. It's there. This then becomes a requirement on them, and it gives us that basis for taking that discussion back into service areas and making sure that they're following that. So those expectations, those good practices, I would say, are evident in the council already, but nevertheless, having that policy and having that consistency is something that we can work on and, as I say, improve on. And the embedding of that role of this committee going forward is also recognised in the policy.
Thank you. So, are we happy with the recommendations as set on page 77? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda then, report of the Internal Audit Manager, report on internal audit from March 25 to May 25, and the annual report of the Internal Audit Manager. And Craig is going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith.
So my report, there's 3 reports in one, so I'll take you through each section and I'll probably take questions on each part, if that's okay. So the first part of my report is the 24-25 update on the work that we've undertaken. Since the last audit committee, we've completed 7 audits in the period, all of which received a satisfactory level of assurance, so no significant issues identified. There is one audit that we didn't manage to complete before the committee, which is housing repairs and maintenance. That's mainly my fault, really, not getting around to reviewing it before getting it out to you. But in terms of the work that has been complete, it's complete. It just needs reviewing. I'm not expecting anything significant to come out of it, and it doesn't impact on my opinion that I've given in my annual report. As you'll see on page 40, which is the significant issues from sort of previous audits, which we usually give you, which is Appendix A, I think, or B, one of them. That there were more on there. So if you remember before, we had a lot of findings on there about software solutions within the housing sector, and we consider those operational now. Damien has been here many times giving you an update on where they're at. So I've removed them from that report. So the 2 that are left now, which we consider that you would need an update on and that we've given you, is the garden waste issue, where we had the bins where some of the service users weren't paying for subscriptions, or we didn't know where that was. So there's a lot of work that's gone into that. We're now at phase 3, where letters have gone out and they're trying to reclaim the money if they can. So it's just that they're following the process and we're just monitoring the situation. And the other issue that we've got on there is about disabled adaptations, because last committee we raised the concern around contract management within that. So we've highlighted that again. We've got an update from the service, which essentially, rightly so, they're looking at LGR in the future. But for the short term, they're going to look at how they manage that process, and they're giving you an update on the end column, which sets out what they're going to do in that period. So that's our update in terms of 24-25. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage before I move on.
No, I don't. Does anyone have any questions on that? No, I think we can continue.
So the next part of my report on page 29 is the Head of Internal Audit's annual opinion. So the report takes you through essentially why we do what we do, the legislation that we have to abide by, the code of practice from SITFA, the global internal audit standards as well, which all of these things set out in terms of the work that we do, standards that we have to abide by, and why we do what we do. So I don't want to bore you with all of that, but that's in there if you really want to look at that. We've got an explanation of the three lines of defence. So this council adopts the three lines of defence in terms of internal control, risk management, processes that we follow, where you've got your senior management, departmental leadership. They're in overall control, so it's their responsibility to make sure that service areas are controlled um, and processes are followed as they should be. You've then got your internal governance, things like IT security, data protection, quality control services. That's your next line of defence. And then your third line of defence is internal audit. So if any issues get through those two areas, that's what the internal audit are there to pick up and look at and report on. You've got a nice graph on page 31, which then sets out all of the different bits of information that feed into the service and what we look at when we're providing this opinion. Again, I won't go into detail, but when we're setting out plans of the work that we're going to do, the things that we would include in that is looking at the corporate plan, looking at value for money, any advice and consultancy work that we can provide, risk assessments, that sort of thing. That all feeds into the work that we do. Again, I've noted in my annual report about we only had one audit this year with improvement required where there was a significant issue. That was the disabled adaptation, so that's in there as well. I've got a responsibility to update you on compliance with the global internal audit standards. I don't know if you remember, we've reported in the past about how the standards changed from UK to global, and we were waiting on SITFA to give their guidance on how they see those standards and how we should adopt them as a council. They came into place in April 25. So the reason why we're now non-compliant is because we've been waiting for those standards to come out. So in September, we're going to do the self-assessment against the update from SITFA and what we should be doing, where we look at ourselves, the work that we do we comply with those standards. I'll report back in September in terms of whether or not we do, or if there's any improvements we need to make based on these new standards. And then with a view to in early 2026 to have an external assessment where someone comes in, essentially audits us and tells us whether or not we're doing the right thing or not. So that I've got that in there. So with all of that and my opinion, so the next part is opinion on page 32. We set out. So we've got some themes on there. So all of the findings that we've had through the year, we've worked out in terms of is there a theme to some of those issues. You can see that on page 33. So there's a breakdown, which is the first time we've been able to do that, and partly that's because of AI, which is quite good really. We've been exploring how we can use AI within audit. So we've started to test it within, can it do audit testing for us? One of the things I did with this report was put all of the findings into Copilot and said, well, tell us what the theme is across the council, what are the things that there are some weaknesses, and it's given us breakdown of that, which is quite good, really. So uh, we mentioned LGR, the local government reorganisation, because it will impact on the future and the work that we do. Um, so it was worth noting in our opinion about how there are risks around that in terms of our senior leadership's time. It will be taken up quite a lot with LGR, so there are risks around are we going to still be able to provide our core services, that sort of thing. So I see internal audit's role in that respect is essentially just keeping an eye out, making sure that our services are continuing to be as good as they should be, and giving that little nudge to services that if we think they're not. So, um, but in terms of all of that, and looking at all the work that we've done, our overall opinion is adequate assurance, which means essentially there are some improvements that we think can be made, should be made, but overall we're not concerned about the control environment. The issues that we've identified in the year, mainly operational, which is where we would liaise with the service and look at how they can improve it. Is there different ways they can do things? Do they really even need to do it anymore? That sort of thing. So uh, that's my opinion element of the report. I don't know if there's any questions around that at all.
Sorry, Craig. So, with regards to the GIA standards, the Global Internal Audit Standards, sorry, did you say they have been adopted slowly, sort of integrated, or not yet?
Yeah, so we haven't adopted them yet. So in terms of the industry, uh, all internal audit departments for every industry has to abide by the global internal audit standards. But essentially, local government is governed by, in terms of the financial element, is governed by CIFA, so the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting. So we needed their opinion on the new standards first, which they've now provided, before we would then go ahead and look at compliant and undertaking that. So that's where we're at the moment.
Any further questions for Craig on this?
Just a,
Yeah,
just a couple of, yeah, just
Councillor.
so, I think, what has been said before, flexibility comes into the report, so that's a good positive move. And also the early identification as well. So remedial work can be undertaken before the problem arises. Is that a fair comment? I think something along the lines of don't bring me the problems, bring me the answers. And I think maybe that's the idea, and that we identify the problems and then we get the answers. So that's all positive. And then just on the right to buy, it's probably passed me by. I know legislation has changed, but I wonder whether it would be worth making a note of that to all members of the council, and just to say legislation has changed, and maybe give them a link so people can actually go on there and see what the percentages are now as opposed to before, and whether we could request that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find sort of a summary of what those changes
Yeah,
have been,
yeah.
and change that around and send it around.
Richard.
Just to pick up on a few bits that Craig mentioned, I wanted to sort of say that the global standards that audit of the audit team, that will come back to your audit committee. So the outcome of that, you report that back when you've got that, so you'll see that, because again, making sure that the right things are in place for a good, adequate internal control environment. Useful to mention that Craig's opinion now will form part of the accounts that we publish. Deadlines on Monday. They'll form an important part of that as part of the annual governance statement. So that'll give you cut and paste in the annual governance statement. You'll get a copy of that next week, so we'll send it out to you next week, and then that will come back. That will now be subject to external audit, and we'll come back to you later in the year. Now, talking about external audit, I'm not going to put you on the spot, Sarah, but I think it's a good point to mention, to introduce Sarah, who is our new external audit manager. So she'll be looking after us. We had Emma looking after us before, so Sarah will be looking after us. So you'll be seeing a lot more of Sarah, hopefully, at all of our meetings going forward.
Yes, thank you. And I do plan to come in person when we've got papers to present, but obviously we didn't have anything on the agenda today, so I'm just joining via Teams.
Excellent. Sarah. And I think it's also mentioned LGR. I mean, LGR, Craig mentioned LGR capacity is picked up as a significant risk. You've got and it's multifaceted, isn't it? As a way that you said, we've got to carry on delivering business as usual as well as implementing local government. I think it's important as well that that will form part of the end government stand as well. That's recognised as a key action for us in the next so you'll see that as a key action as well. You'll see some progress against that as you go through giving updates at your regular meetings on that, as well as process. Worth mentioning. I think those things will spread out from what Craig introduced to that.
Yeah, sure.
On the LGR then, so $64 question is, as the policies converge, how do we, the audit, and then obviously we've got the other scrutiny committees and also cabinet, is there going to be a pathway that by the end of 2 years, then we will have one distinct position really, whereas am I thinking
No. That's exactly it. And as you say, I think just looking at all the different strands. Once we know our partners in that, it's a very complex thing, and it needs careful planning. So as you can see, that just what you said there, Graham, in the next sort of couple of years, there's a lot to do, And I think it's really important. The point that you made as well, business as usual. We made up, we're implementing LGR, but also we've got to maintain. You've got an incoming organisation, you've got outgoing organisations, and you've got to carry on delivering services. So I think from the work we need to do is around that assurance piece of work and that planning piece of work, that you're satisfied the right thing's being done, and all those steps in place. That's the first milestone is submission in September. When we put that forward as Essex, and then once the announcements are made about what that looks like going forward, I think the real work starts almost, if I dare to say. We'll be taking everyone through that process and designing and planning the best we can, because I think I think when you see it elsewhere in the country, it not only on the day the new organisation comes into being, it's years afterwards that you still got to carry on working through those various activities to that it all comes stable and sort of like business as usual with a new organisation. So as well as closing down the old organisation. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Thank you for that, Richard. And Graham, very interesting conversation there, because we all want to see like a whole picture, don't we? But I think we're building up to it. So really good. Any further questions for Craig? No? I think we can carry on.
So the last part of my report is the 25-26 update, so the work that we're doing now as well. So we've got 6 audits underway. None of them are finalised yet, so I've not got any opinions to give to you. So you should have a few in September. But the other update within the sort of the 2025-26 update and the first quarter is around the anti-fraud and corruption strategy. So I think we're a bit early with this, because I don't think it's meant to come until September, but I think in terms of timing wise, if I'm giving you an update on the work that we've done for 24-25, it was just good timing to give you the update on the work that we've been doing in the fraud and compliance side of things. So you asked the question of how does the anti-fraud and corruption strategy translate to the work that we do. So I'm just giving you a quick update in terms of what we've done over the last year. So we've undertaken a tenancy audit, or we're continuously undertaking a tenancy audit of our council stock, and we look at sort of any anomalies that come up from in terms of different names and addresses. Are they people that should be there? That sort of work, and it's identified 10 properties that we've brought back into council stock because of either subletting or through abandonment. So that's sort of one of the things that we do, which is looking at fraud and corruption. We talked about right to buy earlier. It's our department's role to look to essentially vet the people putting in the right to buy. The legislation changed recently in the last year, where tenants used to get something like anything between 40 and 60% discount on a council house, and they've changed it so there's a massive reduction in the discount that people can get now. That resulted in roughly 42 applications all at once. So we had to go through all of those and check that it was the right person that was applying, the money was coming from a legitimate area, it wasn't any money laundering or anything like that involved. Because obviously these are expensive assets that would attract that kind of view. So that's part of what we do. We've also got the National Fraud Initiative, which is where the government, they do a lot of data analysis and they look at different things across the country. They compare things like pension, payroll, all that sort of information, and then when there's any sort of anomalies or any issues that might arise in our area, they send it through, and then we would inspect it to see if there is actually an issue. Sometimes there isn't an issue, and it could just be that someone has they might have had a child in a property and they've turned 18, and now all of a sudden there's another adult there. But it can also lead to other things like compliance work in terms of people aren't paying what they should be paying in terms of council tax, NDR, or paying too much. So it can go each way. So that's part of the work we do there. Most people would have gone on the fraud awareness training by now. All employees have, most members, but we have a rolling program. So when we've got enough new starters come in, we'll still provide that training as well for anyone new to the organisation. So that's all the fraud work that essentially links to the policy. But then it's also worth noting as well the additional work that the team does in terms of looking at, from the compliance side, they look at new properties, new build properties inspections, essentially where developers might have built many properties, but they haven't filled them yet. They would still have to pay council tax. So if they're not selling the properties, council tax is still due. So some of our team go around inspecting those to make sure that that's being handled correctly. We've been working collaboratively with a few other departments now, which is I think all departments are quite pleased with how that's been going. And that would be your environmental health teams, private sector housing, because sometimes we could go out, we're going from maybe a fraud or compliance perspective, but you might identify something that might be an environmental health issue, which isn't our department's responsibility, but we've got an obligation to make sure that as a council we should be identifying that. So there's been a few joint working which we're going to try and continue where we can. Development of data analytics, I mean, I'm quite keen on that because we have limited resource. So if you've got software that can identify anomalies on your behalf, it can help target what we look at rather than just a blanket, let's go review everything. So we've been working with our IT team. They've been coming up with a solution that would take all of the data that we hold as a council. It could be licensing. You could be looking at even not even data that we hold. It could be company's house data. It all feeds into the one area, and then if there's any similarities in that data or where you've got the same name, the different addresses, it will identify that, and then that will help our inspection regime, because again, it may be something with nothing, but it helps target what we're looking at, because we're looking from a fraud perspective, we're looking from a compliance perspective, and we don't have like 10 people to go out around the council, so around the district. So that's an important piece of work that we're trying to develop at the moment, which will help their inspections. And the lastly is just around training of staff, any other staff that go out on inspections that might want to see how the fraud and compliance side works. They've been going out with our team, they've been seeing that side of it, because it's not always an easy thing to knock on someone's door and essentially sometimes you give them bad news. So it's not always it's not the nicest of things. So from a training perspective, those staff have been quite keen to come out with us and see how that works and help them and do their job as well. So that's the work that we've been doing. Again, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, really in-depth work that goes on with the fraud um, and corruption strategy. With regards to council tax, work is undertaken to ensure that the correct council tax business rates are being paid. Do you ever find it goes the other way? Because at the moment, obviously, it's a lot on the telly about being in the correct council tax band.
We don't tend to see much about banding. We do have people asking about it and whether or not they're in the right band or not. So we will point them in the right direction in terms of how they would appeal it, how to put that in. So there is both sides to it. So we're not just there from a fraud and compliance side of things. So if we identify where someone is in real need of a service or they might be vulnerable or there's something where we can't specifically help them, but we know the department that can, or get them in touch with someone or a different department, external department, we will try our best to as well with that because my team are out on the ground, so they're out visiting, they're seeing this, and again, it might not be their responsibility, but we do try to support them where we can when it's not specifically related to the work that we're doing.
That's good to know. Richard, did you want to say anything on that?
Just to make that point actually in a way, because I think what you find is if you've got someone knocking on your door, they're from the council, aren't they? And these are people that may never engage with the council any other way. So as Craig said there, if anything comes to mind that they can ask a question, it could be claiming benefits, it could be claiming support, it could be claiming financial help. We won't know the answer necessarily, but you know, as you said, Craig, we can put them in the right direction. Really important. Someone knocking, it's kind of old-fashioned, isn't it? You've got someone knocking on a door for all the reasons around fraud and compliance, but they become the contact for that person with the council. It's really, really important. I think we've seen quite a lot of examples of where people have gained from that knock on a door and had support and help elsewhere within the public sector. So really important.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. So then are we happy with the recommendations as set out? 22. Yep. Show of hands, please. Yeah, I think we're happy with that. Thanks, Craig. Okay, so the next report then is report of the corporate director, table of outstanding issues. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Just a regular report of the table of outstanding issues for you. There are a couple of elements within my report, Chair, that other officers are going to discuss, but with your agreement, I'll go through my parts and then hand over to them. So I'll present you with updates against general items raised by the committee, which is Appendix A, updates against the 23-24 Annual Governance Statement Action Plan, which is Appendix B, and then recommendations and updates from the external auditors contained at Appendix C. In terms of Appendix A, there are no significant issues to raise and actions remain ongoing. In terms of Appendix B for the AGS, the 24-25 version remains subject to being finalised alongside the statement of accounts, and we're required to publish that by the end of June, so that is ongoing. The associated action plan set out within the statement will include ongoing and outstanding items in Appendix B, but obviously given the time of this meeting and the completion date, you've not got that version, but that will be presented at the September meeting along with revised actions. The appointment of the independent persons, the specification is set out at Appendix D. At the July 24 meeting of this committee, it was agreed to endorse the appointment of up to 2 independent persons. At the March 25 meeting, Rich and I presented a draft specification, and then we held member and officer workshops just to try and come up with an almost finalised version of that spec. Once this version is agreed and subject to the recommendations earlier in the report, we'll undertake the actions necessary to recruit into the post, which will include publicly advertising the opportunity and an application and interview process, and then following that a recommendation will need to be made to full council to confirm the appointment to the role, and then once the successful applicant is appointed, we'll do the necessary induction programme. At the last committee we gave an update on the local audit reform. The government have subsequently announced a series of reforms, and these include simplification and streamlining, increased capacity, funding support, a new local audit office, and transparency and accountability. We then have the outcome from external inspections, which is the first one being the Health and Safety Executive, which John will take after myself, and the Food Standards Agency, which Damien has come for. Regular update on Ripper, there's nothing to report, and the same with whistleblowing chair. I'm happy to take any questions at the moment.
Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Steele.
Just to say, I'm aware that you have made contact with our possible unitary authorities, and it would appear that you are ahead of the game. So I wonder whether some reference could be made to that in the report somewhere, where we could actually highlight. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, right.
I think we can continue then, Karen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's it from me. So the Health and Safety Executive outcome and the Food Standard Agency items. Thank you.
Morning, Chair. The Health and Safety Executive inspected 4 areas of the council earlier on in the year, and as a result of which they've asked us to make some improvements to our asbestos management plans, specifically the maps or the building drawings that identify exactly where the asbestos is, and in truth it's down to where over time material changes have been made to the buildings, the rooms have been renumbered and things like that. So it was the clarity of the plans themselves. So we've been working very closely with the Health and Safety Executive, providing them with the information that they required. I'm pleased to report that today we only have one action outstanding with them, and that's the final completion of the asbestos management plan for Clacton Leisure Centre. Everything else has been completed. We've undertaken new asbestos surveys at all of these sites. That's due by the 30th of June, and I was advised this morning that we're well on track to complete that date and supply that information back to the Health and Safety Executive. From a lessons learned perspective, obviously, we've reminded all the senior managers that the asbestos management plans need to remain current, and if there are any material changes to any of our buildings or locations, that needs to be reflected in updating the plans. Secondly, we've identified that because of sort of leavers joiners, somewhere like Clacton Leisure Centre, that has a higher turnover of staff, shall we say. And obviously, because of the length that they're open, they have different duty managers on call at different times, and they have their own asbestos management duties and responsibilities. So we've identified some additional training needs which we're implementing as we speak. And finally, moving forwards, that the health and safety team during their inspections need to better engage with services and just make sure that those asbestos management plans are reviewed at least annually and inspected annually, and or whenever there's been some kind of material change to a building. That's it.
Thanks, John. So this, just to clarify, this isn't anything to do with the danger of asbestos or anything like that. This is actually just a review of the way it's managed within an audit.
Obviously, we're all aware of the dangers of asbestos, and asbestos is only dangerous if it's disturbed. So this is around the actual recording on our maps and plans as to the location of that asbestos. And it's not that we didn't know where it was, it's just a third party, and in this case the health and safety inspector, wasn't happy with the clarity of those plans. So we could look at a building drawing and tell you that there's asbestos in this particular area, it's being managed, it's being monitored, and it's stable and it's safe. And obviously, we do have a regime of removing asbestos where we can, or when sort of building works are undertaken. So it's not an issue of risk to obviously, it's about the administration and management of it. And I say, in truth, the two main issues were the fact that say the plans just needed to be kept updated and made clearer. Room numbers had changed, and therefore the room numbers were wrong. The asbestos hadn't moved; it was still in that room, so to speak. So that's the real issue. It's the issue of management and admin.
Thank you. That's really reassuring. And so we're on a good track to hit the deadline of June 25 for this work to be completed, and you've gone further, as you said, with the training as well.
Absolutely. So we're in regular contact with this HSE inspector. He's happy with all the improvements we've been made, because as we've been improving the plans, we're sharing them with him and asking, are you happy? We've also adopted the very latest HSE templates as well to improve things and make them clear. So he's very happy with all the work we completed, and so we just have one further plan to complete by the 30th of June, and I'm advised that's on track for completion, and we'll immediately share that with the HSE executive.
Brilliant, thank you. Any further questions for John? Yes, Councillor Stick.
I just think it's a massive job. It's a massive job what you've done. So well done to you and your team. So hopefully that will be reflected in the minutes. But I don't know how we go about getting a press release about this, because you say asbestos. Once you say asbestos, people go, oh. But, as you've explained, it's only when it's disturbed, and also you're doing all the regulatory checks. So I don't know whether, two, we can put in the minutes, and also maybe do a press release. I don't know how we can just take out bits from the minutes to put out, to let the residents know, really.
Perhaps we could reconsider that, as chairman, once we've got the all clear from the HSE that they're happy with, our final action is completed on the 30th of June.
That would be a good idea. Right, yeah, I think we can continue. So no further questions for John? No? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And Karen.
The next item is for Damien, please, Chair for the Food Standards Agency.
Good morning, Chair. The FSA, the Food Safety, I've forgotten their name now. Brain's just gone completely dilly. The Food Standards Agency, they wrote to us in December of last year, just highlighting the fact that we were slipping and not meeting our targets in relation to food inspections, and they requested a meeting with us to discuss how we would improve that and how we would move forward. I think there's a degree of historical slippage within there as well. So I think at one point we had something like 600 outstanding food inspections to do from premises. As a caveat to that, we're constantly getting new applications for new food premises as well. And they obviously have a duty to understand how that comes about. We regularly report twice a year to the FSA where we are with our inspections, and in truth, that's what triggered them to say to us, well, hang on a minute, your reports back to us are showing there's a problem here. So we had a meeting with them, and through that meeting, we discussed the various issues that arose, the plans that we'd be putting in place to address those issues, and they also looked at our staffing figures as well. So part of the problem was that although we had identified a staffing figure of 4 point something, we were actually staffed to 2 point something FTEs. So we were understaffed to deliver on those targets anyway. And you have heard me wax lyrical about this at previous committees, that we struggle to employ environmental health officers. It's not an issue unique to tendering. It's a nationwide issue where there is a shortage of qualified environmental health officers. So we have been in open dialogue with the FSA. They have, a little like John was saying with the HSE, we've given them everything that we have. We have open discussion about the ways forward and how we can improve upon what we're doing. We have rewritten our plan, so we now have a management plan about how we're going to address those issues. And the FSA are happy with the way in which we're progressing. And so as a sort of indication of the improvements that we're making, and I should caveat that by saying of the different elements that we report on, there are 5 ratings. A is the highest risk. We were always 100% on the highest risk areas. We were always inspecting them. It's the other areas, the B, C, D, Z's, that we struggled on. So where we got to at the moment is we had, as I said, outstanding inspections that needed to be covered off. We have moved from unregistered and uninspected food businesses. We had 319 of those. We currently have 0, so we've caught up 100% with those. We had missed inspections, as I said, of 600. We've moved those to 146, and by October we're looking to reduce those to 0 as well. So a huge amount of effort put in by the team working with the FSA to come and reduce that deficit to make sure we're meeting our statutory requirements. As I mentioned earlier, our major problem is attracting EHOs. It is just difficult because of the lack of bodies out there to do it. We use agency staff. Agency staff, as we all know, are notoriously expensive, and within our fixed budgets, it's difficult to get the numbers that you want within those budgets. However, as part of our Grow Your Own, we have been successful in doing that. We are moving officers through junior posts into more senior posts. They're becoming more qualified, and therefore we're kind of backfilling through that. But that takes time. You have to get those people to a point where they then become qualified to be able to deliver against it. So that still leaves us in a slightly precarious position in that we are understaffed. We will still have a need, I suspect, for agency staff to meet that shortfall. But I would like to assure the Audit Committee that we are working incredibly hard with the FSA to put ourselves back to a position where we're fully compliant. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Damien. Is there can we be updated on this further as it progresses?
Yes, happy to. So our target is October. So that's when we're looking to reduce those final numbers to 0. As I say, I would always caveat that we are constantly getting new applications coming for new businesses as well. So it's a never-ending task, like Forth Bridge, but it is something that the team are pushing hard on. And the FSA are happy with us. They're not looking to make further complaints, as I know at the moment. And we are, as I say, openly engaged. We're constantly in dialogue with them.
Yeah, again, so they're not putting any pressures by putting deadlines on us to say, look, guys, we want this done by such and such day.
Not as such, but we do report twice a year on our figures, and October is the next reporting cycle. So they will obviously monitor on that reporting cycle, and then if there are issues that we're not meeting, they will talk to us again about, well, hang on a minute, yes, you've made progress, but actually what's preventing you from making that final bit of progress? So Not pressure per se, but they are monitoring us, and that's fair to say that is their role. That's what they're there for.
Thank you. Any further questions for Damien? Thank you, Councillor Stick.
Off the top of your head, you know, to train to be an officer, what sort of time span is that?
So degree level is 3 to 5 years. Yeah. So depending on how you do the degree, but generally 3 years. But then there's a specialism in food. You can use technical officers in that as well. But if you can get a fully qualified EHO, you get a broader breadth that you can cover. Whereas a technical officer food is just food. So what we're trying to do in service is to develop that breadth, because we can then use the EHOs across a wider spectrum.
I was going to say, is there anything we could do, apprenticeships or sharing staff for people to take on that extra responsibility, or is that more problems, cause more problems than what it solves?
So what we've done is we've lowered the entry standard, for want of a better description. So we're taking people at a lower level, and then we are training them to get them to where we want to go, because that's the best approach. You know, if we can't employ somebody fully qualified, then the only real solution is to grow your own, and then you have to attract people to want to do the job, and then we train them to do the job as they move through. So it's not so much a case of borrowing. It's difficult because all local authorities are in a similar position. And as I said, a lot of us will be using agency staff, but the cost of agency staff is horrific. It's really quite extraordinary.
Thanks, Damien. Any further questions then? No? So, are we happy with the recommendations as set on page... Oh, sorry, Richard. Oh, yeah, could you please? Thank you.
Couple of bits is two things. One, I think the commitment to come back with an update against both the John's update and Damon's absolutely fine. We can make sure that we complete the circle, so you know what's gone on rather than just sort of disappearing. I think the commitment to do sort of advertising. I think if you're happy, we take the commitment as John said around the opportunity, the next opportunity. If you can create problems, sometimes double-edged sword, isn't it? You can create problems that's not there. So if you're happy that we take away that, as John said. So in terms of the wording. So on the recommendations on page 43, and taking recommendation B, I've scribbled down, so it says, notes the outcome from a health and safety executive inspection set out in Appendix E, acknowledges the work undertaken by the relevant services in response, along with the progress against the associated actions, which picks up the point you made about making sure that we acknowledge the work that's been undertaken by John's team and others, if you're happy with that. And then on C, that in respect of the appointment of an independent person, the committee notes that the council is ahead of many other councils in taking such best practice steps to support its overall governance arrangements and then we can, as written. So again, it responds to the point you made about acknowledging where we are against others. So if you're happy with that, and I'll share those in a mo, we've got those, but if you're happy, that's what we're moving and seconding. And the rest is as written.
Yep, thanks, Richard. Yeah, we all happy with that recommendation? Yep, show of hands. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so that then brings us to the end of the meeting. Next meeting scheduled here again on the 25th of September 2025. See.
Let's have a look. Apologies if I've not given you the right advice, Chair. Yeah. So if we happy to, if we're just moving that as written, we're not. If there's any conversation, we'll stop the live feed. But no, if you have to move as written, as it's on blue. Sorry, apologies. Thank you for.
Are we happy to move item 9? Item 9.
10 minutes, yeah.
Show of hands.